Welcome to Intellicide, where we talk about the destruction or murder of intelligence and other topics. I'm Anthony
Oh,
Gentry, and my co-host is Kyle Palmerville. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the election and where do we go from here, and a topic that is near and dear to both of us: role-playing games. So,
yes. A
how,
hobby
how do
we
you feel
share.
about President Donald Trump's second term?
We started this podcast after his first election because America had turned into an idiocracy,
Uh,
right?
right,
And that was like the whole genesis of this. And all this election does is reaffirm why we're here.
right.
Because I mean, and I don't know if it's so much that people are, I mean, part of it I do think is that a lot of Americans, especially, are just not smart. They don't, there's a lot of kind of things that go into it, like this whole thing with like American culture having a stigma against being someone who pays attention to the news or
Mhm.
is involved in politics. They treat politics like something dirty that good people aren't involved in or something, like, and so by not being involved, they don't really know what's going on. They don't stay informed.
I
Most,
don't know if it's that they don't care, they don't want to be involved. I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of time that they have to dedicate to those things to know about, who's running and what platform they are running on.
yeah,
You think about the amount of time you go to work. Say you work an 8 hour day. You work an 8 hour day, you get home. If you're not working from home, you have to commute. So you get home, you may have to cook dinner. Then you also may have to pick up kids. You may have to take those
Yeah, no,
children
I
to
get it. I get
activities.
all that. I mean, people are busy.
Right.
That's not a new thing,
Yeah,
That's
it's
one of
not.
the old. Well, I mean that's an old tactic that they use for, keeping the people occupied so that they don't get involved, you know. Um, it's a shame. I don't know. I mean,
It is. I mean, you
it's
think about
disappointing so real quick, I'm reading a book right now that I think is real interesting because it's all about kind of what happened. It's called The Ministry of Truth.
okay.
And it is all about how the Republican Party and the conservative media, and this is what's really unique about like people, they rewrote recent history, and that's what's different. Rewriting history is not new, but
No.
typically history's been rewritten after those who lived through it have passed. They rewrite history that nobody can contradict because they didn't live through it. Well, what's different now is that they literally can propaganda and the information bubbles that people live in are such that now they successfully rewrote recent history that people just lived through and events that they witnessed with their own eyes, but the propaganda is such that like people don't even have to make sense of it. They're told what to think and they'll parrot
Mm,
that, even if what they're saying is contradictory. Like January 6th was suddenly both simultaneously a leftist Antifa, gathering, and it was a peaceful, tour of the Capitol by
right.
patriotic right wingers,
Right.
and the same people will hold both of those beliefs. Um, but they witness, and it's what's killing me is like even the Republicans who were elected in office, right? Like January 7th, they all agreed on what happened and that it was terrible, it was shameful, that Trump was responsible. But by January 30th, they had completely flipped that.
Right. Yeah. Even
And
though we
that's what held
saw
true to today.
even though we saw the video of the events that occurred there,
Yeah.
the violence and the
hmm
destruction of
Over
property.
1,000 people got convicted for the crimes of that day, but still, that information never really penetrated through to most people. Um, that what happened was a crime and was shameful. I think people live in these custom tailored bubbles now, where like they're able now to filter out things and topics that they just don't want to hear about. And that's what happened. People were able to say, you know what, I just don't want to hear anymore about how January 6th was bad. And so they just proceeded for 4 years with this information bubble that said that, Trump was wronged or whatnot. I mean, whatever it is that they,
Even if you believe the premise that Antifa was out there and instigating, the right wing individuals that were there that had attended President Trump's rally that just preceded the events. Even if you believe that Antifa was out there egging them on, they still did it.
yeah, yeah, I
Like
know.
I can't
But no, it is to the
absolve
point of,
myself of
yeah,
guilt if someone says, "Hey, I want you to go and beat up this person. I want you to just drag them through the mud and this and that." I can't say, "Well, that person told me to do it. They just got me so upset that I did it."
no, yeah, I know. You're talking about like, and that's what I'm saying is that like the arguments that they're making make no sense, and they hold simultaneous, contradictory, nonsensical arguments. You're right. Everything you just said is entirely right, but millions and millions of Americans actually hold that view
Right.
and simultaneously hold the view that it was also a peaceful tour of the Capitol by a bunch of patriots who didn't do anything wrong.
Listen, you can say what you want to about government spending. The government had to spend money to restore and repair and fix a lot of the damage that they
Yeah.
did. They had to pay medical benefits to the people that were injured protecting the Capitol building.
Yeah, no, no. I mean,
It-
you and I know all this, but I mean, the result of the election shows that you and I are apparently in a slight minority of people who believe that that's what happened or that that matters.
right.
There are some people. I think there's a lot of people who just and there's a lot that went into it, but I think part of it had to do with the fact that the economic conditions are such, and the Democrats never addressed it properly. I think that wealth inequality has gotten so bad that millions of Americans are hurting, and that telling them that the stock market's doing really well was not an effective argument.
Hmm.
And they're right. And that's the problem is that there's no liberal party choice in America. There's
Right.
the Democrats that are center right, and
Hmm.
there's the Republicans that are just off the rails. And what happened is enough Americans said, well, what's happening right now isn't working for me, so let's just take it all off the rails.
Well, right. I mean, the sad. I had a conversation with a coworker a little while back, and I have no problem with corporate tax cuts. The problem that I do have with the tax cuts as they were put, and many of these corporations told President Donald Trump that, hey, we're not going to use them, mainly for increasing worker wages. They weren't going to increase output or expand. They were going to use it for the most part for stock buybacks. They
Yeah,
told
and they
them that.
did. Yeah,
Right. They did. And
yeah,
so eh, if you tied that the tax cut, say, hey, we'll cut your tax rate by X amount or percentage if you raise employees' wages by X amount. If you expand production or, increase your whatever, we'll cut it by this much. If you do that, I'm all for that. But the
mhm,
fact is that corporations are not going to hire more people or increase output if the demand is not there. If
yeah,
they're not
yeah.
selling more of the product that they produce, what would you think that they're going to do with that money? They're going to put it in their pocket.
Well, in the current environment, yeah,
That- That's
and
what the
that's the
stock
problem
market.
though. But this environment isn't the way it's always been.
No, the stock market doesn't operate the way that it did, say, 40, 50 years ago. It just doesn't. People aren't okay. The corporations aren't okay with most of these companies are making a profit.
Well, first of all, you're right in the timing, and what changed is those stock buybacks you're talking about. Those were illegal from the time of the Great Depression in the 1930s until Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan made stock buybacks legal again, and ever since then, that's when things have started. Like the wealth inequality's gone off the rails because that share of the profits no longer gets reinvested in the business or in the workers or in any of the stakeholders. It goes straight to the shareholders. And that's the
Right.
root of the problem.
And shareholders are a small percentage of the population.
Yeah, they are. Shareholder primacy is like the root of that whole philosophy. And it's been proven, it's been repudiated numerous times. Like uh 2019, there was a meeting of the top 200 corporations where they wrote a document basically repudiating shareholder primacy. Um, and I think it's a document. It's called, you can Google it, it's called like the purpose of a corporation.
Mm,
And yeah, they basically said in it that it has to be to uplift the stakeholders, not just the shareholders.
mhm.
That if a business exists and it's hurting community and employees and everything around it, but it's only benefiting shareholders, then that business is not worth keeping.
What is that again?
Um, Man, I wish I had this prepared ahead of time.
You should always have the links to these books and articles or whatever
Dude,
handy,
you
pal.
know as well as I do, we didn't decide what we were even going to talk about till 5 minutes before we jumped in the
Hey,
meeting.
our audience doesn't need to see behind the veil, pal. Keep that between me and you.
They don't
But
even know how the
hey,
sausage is
so
made.
this is my thing that we have to be cognizant of with this election. So President Trump named three judges his first term.
More than that.
I,
You mean
I, I
Supreme Court judges?
yeah,
Okay.
Supreme Court judges. He
Hundreds of
named
federal
three.
judges, but
He did
yeah.
he right. He named a wide number
Which
of
really came
federal
back to
judges.
benefit him because one of those judges, Eileen Cannon, threw out cases against him.
But the Supreme Court he named three his first
Hmm.
term.
Yeah, probably
This
gonna name
term
two
he'll
more.
probably name at least three.
Yeah,
So he would have replaced two-thirds of the Supreme Court during his two terms.
yeah.
People, and we may not have the same beliefs or fight for the same things, but if this means something to you, you need to get out there. I don't want to hear anyone complaining about, oh, the country is this and you didn't go vote, or this didn't matter to you. You got to think about those judges. Now, one of the things that I'm really concerned about, and it's been a hot topic button for me for a while, well beyond or before President Trump, even President Obama, was China and the pillaging basically of Africa and its resources. So President Trump has already stated that, hey, I'm going to pull out the Paris Accords. I'm going to do this as far as, EV mandates, etc.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that you have to totally buy into the green energy movement per se. At least not as much as I try to, believe in it. But one of the articles, I just posted a link to this Yahoo article that I was reading and was talking about how China has taken a leadership role now in the green movement, that they've
Hmm.
locked up a lot of resources for battery creation,
Right.
for utilizing green energy.
Hmm.
They have, because of the lack of direction and policy from the US and Europe, that they have basically, they're setting the tone and the direction of these smaller and third world countries regarding green energy.
Hmm.
And my worry or concern is, say, 25 to 50 years from now, we're left so far behind
Hmm.
when not only is it a necessity, but it's so prevalent that there's no way that we can catch up. Just like how now we are so technologically advanced than a lot of other countries, they can't possibly catch up to us, but we'll be left behind.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Your concern's entirely valid because that's China, even though they're communist, has realized the value of reinvesting profits in more than just shareholders.
right,
And so they do. They build out infrastructure and they do things that we haven't been doing in decades. We barely maintain our infrastructure, let alone build out more.
right.
So,
Well,
yeah,
hey,
I mean, people
our
talk about
infrastructure is
this as,
crumbling
the
because the
Chinese,
tax base isn't there.
right?
I mean, you look at. say the advent of the highway system. What was the tax rate during the 50s when freeways and highways and
Eisenhower was president. The top
right,
tax rate was like 92%.
right, right. That we had all that money that we could spend on that. Now we don't spend it. And as much as we complain about the federal government spending, each of these states receives hundreds of millions of dollars per state
Hmm.
as far as, roads, spending on roads, bridges, etc., infrastructure. So, are we going to lessen? We want to cut federal dollars. Are we going to cut those dollars as well? Where is that money going to come from? People aren't thinking about it in that regards. And again, I believe in spending money responsibly. I don't want to see wasteful spending. But instead of fixing that, we are just totally saying no, we're going to cut off your funding. Serving in the military, I never understood why we had this belief that, hey, if you spend it, if you don't spend it, you're going to lose it. I've always thought that that was the wrong message to put forth. You should say, "Hey, you don't spend it. That's okay. You'll receive the same level of funding next year. Just give us that money back, and we'll send it to areas that we, need more money spent, or we'll just hold on to it to, hey, something pops up. We have that money. We don't need to increase taxes. We have it."
Right.
But you have this belief that, hey, if we don't spend it, we're going to lose it. I don't understand that because we
Yeah.
just we waste it.
Well,
We
they had to go
oh
back to a time pre-computers when they had to keep track of all those resources on paper, and it was easier for them to simply say, well, we'll figure the new budget based on the old budget's numbers. They couldn't keep track of surplus and how to allocate that surplus like you could today with computers. Like what you're talking about is possible today. We're really back in World War II times, whenever that policy was really put in place. They couldn't keep track of that. That money would have been lost to graft and greed. People would have
dude,
started pocketing it.
we lost a
Nowadays,
billion. We lost $1 billion during the Iraq War. $1 billion.
yeah,
It
yeah,
just disappeared.
yeah.
Really, $1 billion?
Well,
And I'm not talking about like in the ether. I'm not talking about some digital currency on a computer somewhere. It was an actual
a
$1 billion,
pallet of it.
physical
Yeah, I know.
dollars.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, we can go
No,
on
I
and
know,
on and
and
on
this is
about
where I
this.
mean, like you and I can talk about policy and all that, but here's the problem, right? That discussion is only interesting to you and I.
Right,
When it comes to a show like this, let's be honest, and this election reaffirms this, the American public's not interested in that level of detail, right? Like they're not watching all those shows that talked about policy on CNN and MSNBC and CNBC.
right.
Those all got canceled because they had no ratings. Nobody in America wants to hear about that stuff. In America now, it's all driven by emotion. It's all driven by social media algorithms that are driven by outrage and
Mhm.
and fear to get engagement.
Correct.
So everything people like, that's why when you're talking about like how the money's spent and everything, it's like most of America now doesn't care, doesn't know about any of that. They're more concerned with like, oh my gosh, is a trans woman in the going to be in the military?
Right.
Or, oh my God, is there going to be, are there immigrants? You know, I it's they're more worried about the things that have been put into their social media feeds, their information feeds, because that's the thing. It's we talk about social media like it's something different from the news, but it is now the primary way most people get their information. So
Mm.
like there's not really like a news ecosystem. I mean there are shows out there that talk about the news. There are news organizations that put out articles, but most people get their information from viral clips on social media about people talking about issues
Well,
like this. Now, that doesn't go into as depth as we go, but like you get like a short clip of a couple of people talking about, oh my God, there's floods of immigrants coming across America. Doesn't that make you mad and
well,
angry and sad?
right.
You 10 seconds and you can get a million views with that because it generates fear,
But we have to
emotion.
separate. Social media is not necessarily news. Matter of
Oh,
fact,
it is
the
now.
the the
To
the,
most
the
people, it's indistinguishable.
well, to them it's indistinguishable, but there is a definable, there's a definition to news, to the term news. And it's always driven me crazy, the
Well,
misnomer that Fox News.
Hmm.
And it's not news, it's
It's not.
opinion for the most part.
Well,
Now,
they
right,
say that's the
they
whole thing.
they
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 go to give
intersperse news in there, but
right,
it's 90% opinion and 10% news.
and
Hey, there
they've
was a flood in Florida or North Carolina. That's news.
this
Oh,
is where I
did you
say
see the government and their response to the
the
flooding in
distinction isn't
Florida?
really there anymore. I understand what you're saying, but the problem is what you and I grew up with as news is now something that's repackaged on entertainment channels. Like Fox
Right,
News has been in court multiple times, and its excuse in court when it gets sued is always that it's not news, it's entertainment.
right,
They admit readily that they're not news, that it's entertainment,
right,
yet they are the largest source of information for most Americans.
right,
So when you say like it's not news, I mean, it's kind of a distinction without a difference these days. To the vast majority of America, it is where they get their news.
right,
And I understand what you're saying. Technically, reality in reality, there is a difference. But in the idiocracy that we live in now, there's not.
yeah.
And we need to learn how to adapt to the new media landscape in order to get ideas like you're talking about, like, hey, maybe we should spend our tax money on services that benefit us instead
Well,
of stock buybacks.
it,
Interjecting that kind of stuff into the ecosphere where people just get their infotainment, because that's what it is. It's infotainment now.
right, right. You're getting information. The problem that I see is that you can curtail it. Like you said, with social media, I have that algorithm that serves me certain things based on what I viewed before, etc. So if I don't want to see any left-wing news or information, I won't see it. And if
Right.
if I click on the three dots or swipe whatever this way or that,
Yeah.
hey, they don't like this, serve them less. So how do you reach those individuals that have said, I don't want to see that?
And that's what I'm saying. So the way is those individuals have created a wall on those topics, right? So you don't package it as left-wing news anymore. Now it's a show about cars or, whatever. It's entertainment. It's an entertainment show with comedians,
Uh-huh.
whatever. Oh, they happen to bring that stuff up, but it's not
Right.
news. It's entertainment. It's comedians. It's a comedy
Uh,
show. It's, whatever. But it's anything but news. That's how you do it. You sneak it into their feed under another tag,
mhm.
basically, quite
Right.
literally, so that that content's no longer tagged as news or leftist. It's now tagged as, gaming entertainment content or whatever.
Right. Wow.
That's how they've
Well,
been doing it. That's how they've snuck all this, right-wing ideas into, they took over like gaming media. That's all the young men. It used to be that the idea was that, younger people were more liberal. Well, they managed to somehow corrupt the many young men in America who are now
yeah.
very conservative, much more racist than their parents, you
Mhm.
know, because they listen to things like Andrew Tate and Joe Rogan and
Mhm.
stuff like that, who do this kind of thing. They sneak right-wing ideas into what they claim is not a right-wing, you know, show.
Right. Well, the left better figure it out.
Right. And that's what they're struggling to do. The problem is all the money's on the other side, you know.
Well, there's a lot of left leaning money. It's just again, I don't know where it's being spent or how it's being spent.
Well, it
Uh,
needs to be funneled to people like us to up our production value. That's what seriously. I mean, seriously, think about it. So they take the shows on the right, right?
uh,
Like the what's his face? So there was Andrew Tate and Joe Rogan, but who's the guy that had the dinner with Trump, who just got his house burned down or whatever?
is it
The,
Charlie? What's
the
his name?
Your Body My Choice guy.
Yeah,
I can't remember his
I
name,
know
but
it's
he
one
was
guy
basically
that's
like he's like a 20-something-year-old YouTuber who was doing like video game streams and stuff like that, and he's now turned into this. He's like a Nazi propagandist who had dinner with the former president,
uh,
and because they get money pumped into that ecosphere.
Nick
You know
Fuentes.
what's that?
Is it Nick Fuentes?
Oh, that's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'll take some money if
Well,
rich left
and
leaning
yeah. Honestly, what it
iconoclast.
kind of needs is that, in oh, it looks like we're running out of time already. Um, it looks like, what they need to do is have like some nonprofits that are set up
Right.
specifically
They
for
they
funneling
also,
money
I think
into
they
that.
need to have their own institutions like the Heritage
Yeah.
Foundation on the right. The left needs institutions like that that does studies and gets information out there and sets agendas or whatever.
Hmm.
And we've talked about, some of the agendas. I don't agree with every agenda on the left or whatever, but there
Yeah.
needs to be a better messaging or whatever about what the ultimate goal is for them. If you want freedom, because the right says they want freedom as well. A lot of libertarians say they want freedom, freedom to do this, do that, etc.
Yeah.
But they don't want, full freedom.
No, well, no, what they want is freedom for themselves, not for anyone else. And that's
Exactly.
really the
Exactly.
distinction the left needs to kind of highlight is
Yep.
the fact that real freedom is messy. And real freedom means that you have to tolerate some people making decisions you don't agree with.
Right.
And that's the thing that the right can't do.
Correct.
They can't let other people make decisions that they don't agree with. They can't let trans people be themselves. They can't let gay people be themselves. They can't let, anybody who thinks differently than they do believe what they do with and be left alone. They feel like they need to go make that person's life hell or make that person not exist anymore or whatever because they can't handle it. And that's really the problem. That's not freedom. That's the opposite of freedom. That's, you basically destroying freedom for all those other people. And that's really the thing is if you believe in true freedom, it's messy
Mhm.
and
Right.
um yeah, I don't know.
All
Uh
right. Well, hey, we're not gonna fix it in a day. We're
no,
not
we're
gonna
not.
fix it in the
So
next 4
we
years.
should
So
probably talk real
let's move on.
quick
Right.
about RPGs.
Yep.
The thing we were going to talk about ostensibly. The D&D came out with their new 2024 rule books.
uh,
I know you and I talked about it. You don't haven't really played D&D in years. You play other
it's
systems.
probably been almost 30 years.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean I've been playing the D so I skipped fourth edition. I played D&D 3.5.
Mhm.
And then they came out with fifth edition and I started playing that. And now they came out with these new rules that quite honestly are just kind of an update to fifth edition.
Mhm.
It really feels more like a supplement than a new version.
Mhm.
Um, they redid some of the spells and stuff, but most of the rules and mechanics are exactly the same, except that they clarified a bunch of things that needed clarifying and they added a bunch of rules that I think the game needed.
Mhm.
Something that they used to have way back in the day in like the expert set, the blue box of
Mhm.
D&D, was like the ability for players to make their own bases and
Mhm.
build their own castles or whatnot.
Mhm.
That was something that like as players got higher in level, they were looking for other stuff to do besides kill things. Something to do with all that treasure that they collected.
Well, and see, this is where, and we've had conversations about this. My goal in role playing RPGs is to focus on the role portion of it.
Mhm.
And I understand that there's individuals that, hey, you're just the dungeon crawling, hack and slash. I don't want to care about, developing a connection to someone else or a relationship.
And so now it's funny you say that because that is a valid reason to come to the game, and that's the thing that you like about the game. The new DM's guide for the 2024 version, I think, has a really excellent chapter on this where they talk about if you're going to run games, you have to recognize that different people come to the game for different reasons, that there are different things people enjoy about the game. Some
Right.
people enjoy role playing, like you're talking about.
Right.
And there are things you can do as a DM to make the game more enjoyable for those people. But at the
Right.
same time, there are other people who just like the combat, or that
Right.
just like actually there are some people who just like the social aspect of gathering at a table with a bunch of people to do something. They're not really interested in any particular part of the game.
Right.
So there's a bunch of different reasons people come to the game.
Right.
And I try personally as a DM to, you know, make it as fun as I can for everybody for whatever reason they have for playing, you know?
Well, right. If you have a mix of individuals, just like society, if there's a mix of individuals, their tastes, their desires, etc., then right, I'm not going to please everyone 100%. I can't possibly do that.
Right. But
But
like,
I do want to offer them an opportunity to enjoy what they want to do. I have a
yeah,
mix of combat, but from someone who has game mastered games and right, you do D&D, I do hero system or whatever. It's similar to GURPS. It's a generic system, and I typically do like science fiction, modern day, spies, etc., espionage, or like now I'm running a zombie campaign, Walking Dead basically. But as a GM, and I've told people this, for me, combat, yes, while it's a necessary component of role playing RPGs, to me it's just boring. It's all I'm doing is number tracking, how many, points of damage did this person take versus that person? What are they gonna do? It's bookkeeping, accounting. Now, I don't want to do that for a living. And I don't want to sit there for say an hour session and only do combat every time we get together. That just not
yeah,
that's not enjoyable to me,
yeah. Oh, I agree.
you know. And so again, it needs to be a give and take. Hey,
Yeah. The
we
players
get
need
to
to
the
understand
combat,
the same thing. Yeah,
right?
that's the thing. That other people at the
Let's talk
table.
afterwards.
Yeah,
Right,
because I've played at tables too. It's one of those things that can make the game unenjoyable when there's a player at the table who only likes combat and hates role playing
right,
and doesn't want, and that's where it gets unenjoyable, is when he tries to stop role playing from happening because he doesn't like it
correct.
even though there's other people at the table who do.
Yep,
Or the opposite, there's someone who hates combat, likes role playing, and so like there's no combat in the game, and it's all role playing. So for the people
right,
who like combat, it's not fun.
right,
Um,
right,
so yeah, you got to try to make it a balance and make the players understand why you're trying to make it a balance like that. Um, and the games I've run are somewhat different. If it's three-fourths combat people versus one-fourth role-playing people, I'll weight the game that way. I'll still give them opportunities to role play.
right,
Or even like, here's the thing: if I've had a table once where it was only really one person who cared about combat, and everybody else was there for like the role playing and stuff
right,
or the puzzles and that.
right.
So when I did have combat, it was only that character that I made go through it. Like he
Uh-huh.
he had a combat encounter,
Right.
but I didn't make the rest of the everyone else go through it.
Right. So with that, what did you have that character doing, and what was that character occupied with when everybody else was going through the role play or the puzzle part? What
The
was
way
he
I
doing?
had it was I took advantage of a situation where he failed a trap saving throw. So I had him fall in a pit where he had
Uh-huh.
to fight a monster
Uh-huh.
while everybody else was basically getting through the trap, like
Okay.
getting over the pit.
Right.
Above him, he was down below having combat with the
Okay.
monster.
Okay. Okay.
But it was like ways like that that you can kind of sneak in an encounter like
Mhm.
with someone, if they're the only ones who like it, then try to separate them and have them do it.
Right.
And that way it doesn't take that long because frankly, one character and a monster it's over pretty quickly. So
Mhm.
makes it easier for others. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's one of the things that they're extending the life of the game in the new version by giving people the ability to do more crafting and building with their characters, which in a lot of games, I think is as the game matures, that's the thing that they tend to add in supplements. I'm not familiar with hero systems, but I do know from like the Marvel role-playing game that I've played, which is another like hero kind of system.
Mhm.
That's one of the things that they start with the basic game system, and then as it goes on, they add more things for players to do. Well, we're less than a minute now, so we're
Okay. Well, yeah, and like you said, we could talk about this, for a long time. We're gonna have to come up with another show or whatever where we can talk a little bit more about it. But,
or even play
I'm
a game, a
happy.
live action play game.
All right, so join us, next time. Please like and subscribe to the video,
Yes.
and we will see you next time here on Intellicide.
Have a good day.